Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brett Schanzenbach. I'm the president and CEO of the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce. We're excited to co-host this World Kindness Day webinar today. And I'd like to have my counterpart from Chula Vista Chamber introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Kindness Day. Marcy Weaver, the CEO and president of the Chula Vista Chamber of Commerce.
Awesome. Thank you. And it's great to partner with our friends in the chamber world. And we're going to kick it over to Elizabeth. Elizabeth is the creator of the Kindness Club, and I think she's the curator of today's content. And so, Elizabeth, we're going to kick it to you.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're really excited that you're here today for our World Kindness Day webinar with Dr. Fraser on the neuroscience of kindness for thriving businesses. So again, World Kindness Day today, Kindness Week worldwide runs for 8 days. There's an extra day in the week when it comes to kindness, and we're thrilled to have you all joining us. You may be wondering what the kindness connection is between the Chula Vista Chamber of Commerce and the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce hosting today's webinar. Yes, both of those cities begin with C. Yes, they both touch the coastline here in California, but they're at opposite ends of our region. And what unifies both of these cities is the kindness movement that both are involved with. Kids for Peace got their start in Carlsbad several years ago, and the Carlsbad Chamber has the Kindness Certified Companies program. And the Kindness Club, which I'm affiliated with, started in Chula Vista, and our local Chamber of Commerce has been very supportive of the local kindness movement. So that's the kindness connection that we're here for today. Our friends in Carlsbad who are joining us will recognize the sign that's on the top of this screen, the Kindness Matters letters that Kids for Peace installed 2 years ago. They involved 15 schools in painting this project. And with a lot of siblings, 2 years later, our sister sign came along here in Chula Vista. So there's a very cool story, very kind backstory to the letters. And rather than take the time today to go through all of that, I'll post the link in the chat a little bit later. But here we are. Welcome to the family photo. We now have Carlsbad sign up on I-5, Interstate 5 in the north part of the county. Chula Vista sign is on Interstate 805 in the southern portion of the region, just unveiled last week in time for Kindness Week worldwide. And we were very intentional in using the same words, kindness matters, to bookend the county with kindness. And maybe next year we will have kindness matters signs in the east and the west. But for now, for today, we are here to learn why kindness matters so much to our minds, to our brains, and to our workplaces. So whether you work in small business or a large corporation, in healthcare, education, or anywhere in between, if you're in school, you're retired, you will learn something new today. I guarantee it. And I invite you to commit to taking those learnings forward, serving them forward in your communities, your homes, your workplaces, and beyond. So without any further ado, we are very honored to welcome today Dr. Jennifer Fraser. She is the author of 5 books and has a PhD in comparative literature. She's an award-winning educator and the founder of the Bullied Brain. She writes a regular series for Psychology Today, advises institutions and governments, and brings neuroscience into conversations about culture, ethics, and leadership. Dr. Fraser's mission is clear: to transform systems that normalize manipulation and silence truth tellers, and to do so with the superpowers of empathy and kindness. And you're going to learn all about that today. So after her presentation, we'll have time for your questions. There is a Q&A bar at the bottom. I know many of you are used to Zoom meetings that have a chat feature. Today we're in a Zoom webinar, so you'll be using the Q&A. So as you have questions come up, please go ahead and put them there, and I will keep an eye on those. It helps me to not get overwhelmed by all of the chat messages, to have the Q&A framed up so that we can make sure that we have a really thoughtful discussion after the webinar. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jennifer Fraser.
Hi, everybody. I am very thankful to be here. I was just very honored to be contacted by the Kindness Club, and I think it's fabulous that you are doing this Kindness Matters initiative from the very top to the very bottom of California. And so I'm very pleased that Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce and Chula Vista Chamber of Commerce came together to support this talk today, this learning about kindness from a brain science point of view, which is really pretty fascinating. I think it applies to everyone because we all have brains. I care a lot about kindness because I was in a situation in the workplace where there was a very profound lack of kindness. And so it made me start to study the phenomenon. I wanted to know, what is kindness at work, and why does it matter? And why do people talk about it in this particular way? And how might it change what we think about it if we looked at the research on it? These were the kind of bigger picture questions that I had, bubbling up for me as I was pulled into a scenario at work where there was bullying, and then it was covered up, and it was covered up with gaslighting. And just to give you a 30-second definition of gaslighting, it happens sometimes for people like it did at my workplace, where I think they were very panicked and they didn't want to be seen as negligent, and they had not effectively dealt with bullying over a period of time. And so they started to make it appear as if the problem lay with me. I was the one at fault. I was the offender here, but I was just simply reporting bullying. So it's the classic shoot the messenger dynamic that can happen in workplaces when people panic. So I started to look at the brain science of all of this, and it's unbelievably important and applicable to all of us at work. And it can improve our workplaces immeasurably to understand it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So my goal is to usher in a new leadership model. And I call that leadership model clear-sighted leadership. And what I really mean when I say clear-sighted leadership is that we can use brain scans in order to make better decisions about how we treat one another in the workplace. And the brain scans on kindness and lack of kindness are stunning. And they teach us very quickly and in a very visceral and visual way what's going on in our brains when we are being exposed to compassion and kindness and these types of behaviors versus when we're being exposed to a lack of kindness, cruelty, things like humiliation or threat. These kinds of things on a brain scan are startling. And so it's this idea that, well, just a second, maybe we should be leading with our brains in mind. Maybe we shouldn't be ignoring our brains when it comes to trying to figure out what's the best way to guide people to help them to be happy and healthy and high performing in our workplaces. And so clear-sighted leadership is about clarity. It's about being able to see clearly, which we can't do if we don't use brain scans because our brain is invisible to us. And this is why the brain scans are so helpful. Compassion is just another word for kindness. Once I've walked you through the science on this, you're going to be like, kindness is the most important thing in the workplace, which it is. And then it's exciting. The Kindness Club is a very good example of how when we focus on this and we shine a spotlight on it and we get people to understand, then the impact is unstoppable. And that's, I love to be a part of that and support the Kindness Club in that kind of a reach. When we fail to be kind, we sort of think it's that's just a choice, and maybe I was having a bad day, and maybe this person is unkind all the time, and that's just so-and-so. And we think that, it's something we should teach children, and we should get children to be kinder, and we tell ourselves that bullying is a childhood issue. And none of these things, in fact, are true. Kindness is arguably a superpower in the workplace. It's referred to in science as empathy, which we're going to talk a lot more about. But if you look at job advertisements these days in the 21st century, empathy is seen as a critical feature in leadership, management, and everything else at work. And the thing that I love about it is it's the one thing, well, there's a number of things, but it's a very prominent thing that technology cannot do. So AI, artificial intelligence, it can mimic emotional content, or it can mimic empathy, but it doesn't actually feel it. And I will explain in a little while why that's incredibly dangerous. Because when you can mimic but you don't feel, this is when you can do things that are evil, what we would call evil. That's the old-fashioned word for it. In contemporary neuroscience, the term is empathy erosion. It's visible on a brain scan. People that do things that are incredibly cruel and damaging are people that have empathy erosion. And that's very hard information to hear. But the exciting part of it, and this is something none of us should ever forget, is we have neuroplasticity. Our brains are able to change until our very last moment on the planet. Our brains can be built back up if they have been eroded. It's just that we don't look at our brains, we don't know about our brains, most of us. And so we don't know that this is what's fueling cruel behavior, and so we don't try and fix it. So you can well imagine in the business world that the more empathic and therefore manifesting in kindness employees are, leaders are, everyone is, you're going to be healthier, which means you're going to be more productive, which means you're going to be more profitable. So in our brains, we have empathy neural networks. And so when people think about kindness and when they think about empathy, they tend to think about the heart, but it's not in the heart, it's in the brain. And so these empathy neural networks, they are involved in at least 10 different brain regions. So they're very complex and they're very distinct and they can be studied. And so our empathy neural networks there's two different ones. One is called cognitive empathy and one is called affective empathy. The cognitive empathy is what AI can do. AI can use its brain power, its cognition that is similar to how a human brain works, and it can manifest it, but it doesn't feel it. When you have affective empathy at work, when it's lit up, you are actually feeling what someone else is feeling. You have it on that level. Your brain is mirroring their brain, which we're going to talk more about. If that's kind of seems like an overwhelming concept, I'll explain to you. It's not, and it's really cool how it works. So when we choose to do kindness, it's because our empathy neural networks are advising us on what to do. The cognitive empathy will look at other people and it will compute, basically. It will visualize and understand within the brain. It will go, oh, by this type of behavior or words or tone of voice or facial expression, I can tell what this person is thinking. I've got a pretty good idea what they're feeling. And I also am therefore able to understand what they might be intending to do. This is called cognitive empathy. So, the expressions you'll say, oh, so-and-so is really good. They can read somebody like a book. Or they will say, oh, I know what makes him tick. Well, that's your cognitive empathy at work. It's called theory of mind. And it's one of our great skills. The key thing to understand, though, is with our cognitive empathy, we're not feeling. We're not in that affective world. We're in a much more thinking world. We're thinking about someone else. And that makes it distinct. When you have affective empathy activated, you literally feel what the other person feels. Most people don't know this, but babies' brains are wired with empathy. Within the day they're born, they will start to pay very close attention to the adults in the room and even start to imitate things facial expressions, etc., as best as they can, being babies, brand new babies. Nonetheless, we are born with empathy, which tells neuroscientists it's super important to us. It means that our brains are wired like this because it's key to our survival. So, when I'm working with younger people, with kids, I ask them all the time, why do you think our brains are wired with empathy? And we will get to a place where people understand, human beings survive in community. We survive with connection. We need each other to flourish. We don't do well alone out in the wilderness without claws or fur or sharp teeth or wings or fins or anything that could help us survive. We are likely not to make it out in the wilderness alone. Now, as soon as humans are in a group, we are just unstoppable. We are powerhouses, and community is critically important to the brain. So the brain is wired with little ones all the way up through childhood. We're dependent on adults for a long time. Our brains are wired to try and understand right away what the powerful people feel, think, and intend. So this is why babies have this kind of special feature. We all have it. And this is why empathy erosion is particularly awful and sad, because it's a key component of our brains. We don't ever want to let it get eroded or give it up. So I just want to distinguish quickly for you here sympathy versus empathy, because it's important in the workplace. Sympathy is when you stand up and look down on the person and you just feel sad. You're like, I'm so sorry you're in this hole. And you really do feel bad for them. And it's an okay emotion. But as the leading expert on this, who's so articulate at making it come alive, is Brene Brown. And Brene Brown explains that sympathy, that type of feeling, leads to disconnection. It blocks us from connecting with each other. Whereas empathy, why it's such a superpower, and it's the heart of kindness. Kindness is when you jump down into the hole. You really act on this feeling that you have, and it's a strong feeling, to be able to relate and connect with the person. So your different thing you say is, it's so dark here. How are you coping? That's connection. And this is what we want to foster in the workplace, not sympathy. Oh, from on high, I look down and I feel sad for you. We want to be, I know what sadness is. I'm down in this space where I can feel sadness, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make you feel better. That's the kindness gesture that we're all looking for. So I just want to walk you through how neuroscientists came to understand these two different kinds of empathy and how they work. So Dr. Tanja Singer is a Swedish neuroscientist, and she did a really interesting experiment. So normally when we look at like fMRI machines or MRI machines, I don't know if people on the listening to this have had an MRI, but basically we usually think of it as a one-on-one situation where the medical experts are going to look at the person's brain who was in the MRI. Now, where Dr. Singer did something really innovative was she put two people side by side in MRIs, and she showed one person getting their fingers pricked with a sharp pin that was causing them pain. You know, our hands are very full of sensors, so it was really painful. They're feeling pain. And then the other person in the other fMRI machine didn't have any pricks or pain or needles, nothing. They weren't in any kind of physical pain, but they were observing the other person. And what is so fascinating is that the brain of the observer lit up in identical pain pathways, neural networks, as the person being hurt. It was like a stunning demonstration of affective empathy. When we say that expression, I feel your pain, we actually feel their pain. Our brain will mirror someone else's pain. And that's how we go to help them. Now, what's really interesting is it's in a muted form. It's an exact mirror, but it's not as strong. So the person being hurt can't help themselves. They've fallen down into the dark hole. They're stuck. But the person who can feel their pain in a muted way is activated to act with kindness. That's how kindness gets sparked in the brain. And they've documented it over extensive research since that time. So this is just a repetition, and I'm doing the repetition purposefully because our brain learns by repetition at timed intervals. So that means you have to have it constantly said to you, wired in, because it's gotten fired up over and over and over again. And so, you know, at work, we will understand that in order to teach people skills, in order to get them to acquire a bunch of knowledge that they need to do the work that they do, it has to be repeated. It has to be over and over every day, different workshops, meet the clients, go over the list, you know, these types of learnings, these skill building exercises are a day in, day out venture. But when it comes to things like kindness, we make the mistake of thinking we can just share the knowledge like, hey, kindness matters. Kindness is important. You need to really believe in kindness and use it at all times. And then we think it's kind of a done deal. But that's not how our brains work. Our brains work by repetition at timed intervals. So even me, just this second time, I've given you another picture, and I'm telling you once again, brains can mirror pain in a muted form. You're going, oh yes, that I'm going to remember that. I'm going to wire that in. So workplaces that want to thrive in this regard, they have to make kindness a daily practice. Whether it's talked about or it's a fun competition or somebody wins a prize for being the kindness of the day, or you just share a little, okay, let's take 5 and read this article, doesn't matter, but it just has to be that kind of never forgetting that this is the modus operandi in businesses that want to be happy and healthy and high performing, because kindness is a flourishing environment for brain power. And unkindness is a absolutely detrimental environment for brains. They don't function well. We're not going to spend time on that today, but trust me when I say, if you live in an environment that lacks kindness, it is completely going to shut down brain power, because it's going to start focusing on threat. It's going to focus on anxiety. It's going to focus on feeling depressed and low. It's going to focus on everything you don't want it to focus on. You just want it to be doing a fabulous job with work, but it's getting pulled into other areas because it doesn't feel safe. And when our brains don't feel safe, they don't function well. So, okay, so our brains are wired for affective empathy. We feel other people's pain. I'm just going to tell you one more quick, fascinating thing. Our brains probably could be brought to higher levels if we practice this kind of thing more. They see with Tibetan monks who practice compassion, in other words, kindness, in their meditation, their brains are utterly remarkable on brain scans. And another group that's really interesting is the Kalahari Bushmen in Australia, where if they are out in the field working and another one of their tribe is attacked, let's say by a lion or whatever, a snake, they will stop what they're doing 20 kilometers, 20 miles away and start running. And they will run to that person and get them the help that they need. That's how much their brains are wired into each other, 20-kilometer distance. Whereas, so in other words, sky's the limit with our brains. We could probably really do remarkable things if we poured more energy into kindness and into creating these kinds of atmospheres where it flourishes. So when you tap into your empathy and you're conscious about it, you tap into the neural networks that produce compassion and kindness out in manifested in our world. When you tap into that, you automatically are seeing other people in your workplace and in your family, in your friendships as holistic beings. And that creates a kind of affective bond where you are responding to them at all times with kindness. Now, everyone on this call will have had moments in their lives, I certainly have, where their empathy completely turns off. Now, your empathy turns off and you behave in unfortunate ways because it gets over, there's an override button for disasters. So if you're really, really angry, like let's say your kids do something that scares you and you think they're going to get hurt, or if they do something like they break a rule that's, like a curfew or driving the car, things that, that literally their lives and other people's lives are on the line. Or if they do something that's really destructive that they should not be doing, you might lose it. Your empathy goes off. The next thing you know, you're yelling, you're angry, your face is mad, you're issuing, threats and punishments and so on and so forth. That happens to all of us. We can be so stressed out. You can think about work. Think about a manager who has to deliver a huge project and the team is floundering. They're going to lose their cool. That happens. And that's not a bad thing. That's a very human thing. The brain learns by making mistakes. Yes, it learns by repetition at timed intervals, but it also learns by making mistakes. So we have to let ourselves off the hook. And we have to get our empathy back online. And as soon as we go and say to our team at work or to our kids up in their rooms that we lost it and we're sorry and it was unfortunate and we're going to make it up to everybody and we're going to try harder and so on, then our empathies come back online. And when you have a really healthy brain, when you don't have empathy erosion, you feel it. You feel just as you felt angry, you feel a bunch of regret and anguish and guilt about hurting people you love, whether it's at work or at home. So, I mean, this is all a very natural cycle and people don't need to be beating themselves up if they lose their empathy. It comes back online. It goes offline when you feel under threat. And that's just natural. Not much you can do about it, except we could all try to be like Tibetan monks and we could all try to be like Kalahari Bushmen and make it stronger. But we also can let ourselves off the hook when it crashes. So one of the most empowering things about our brains that's extremely exciting is that we all have neuroplasticity. That is our brain's ability to grow and get stronger and be more flexible and more powerful. All of us have it until the last day on the planet. Our brains are always changing based on how we practice, like what we're doing, and based on our environment. Those are the two big influencers of how our brains are being shaped. And so even more than 100 years ago, in 1906, a neuroscientist won the Nobel Prize for his work in neuroscience. And he famously said, so this is more than 100 years ago, he famously said, any man can be the sculptor of his own brain if he so chooses. And so it is a choice. We can choose what we want our brains to look like. Now, we can't control environment. I mean, we can try to regulate it, but we can't fully control it. What we can control, though, is what we practice. So if we practice brain fitness, and brain fitness became a thing at work, like physical fitness did back in the day in the 1980s, for people who are older like me, you will remember that we all of a sudden learned that we could dance around and wear really bad clothes to very bad music in the 80s and have a lot of fun doing it and get our fitness levels like way up. We didn't have to be a professional athlete. We didn't have to play a sport. None of those things. We could just dance around, and it was really good for our heart and therefore our happiness and our high performance. And workplaces took this on like a huge innovation, and everybody got a gym pass, and they built gyms right into buildings and this and that. It just became a part of our lives. I think we're at a turning point where brain fitness is going to take on that same role. Brain fitness, half an hour a day of working out your brain in a very specific way that neuroscientists have designed. It's called Brain HQ, Brain Headquarters, Brain HQ, for anyone that wants to try it and look at the research. It's really good for us, and it's good for our businesses. So if we are in workplaces where our kindness has been eroded, where empathy is no longer ruling the day, where people are stressed and under threat and burning out, this is a huge opportunity for us to change. We can change, and our brains will change along with us. So if we have a scenario where there's an unhealthy dynamic, we can make it healthy. We can work together. And throughout all the research, the most critical component of it, every step of the way, is kindness. We have to be kind to ourselves when we make mistakes and fail. We have to be kind to other people who make mistakes and fail until we build up this new way of being together for healthier, happier, more high-performing workplaces. So what's really remarkable, and this is new research, I specifically went to Europe to hear the leading researcher on this, Dr. Sue Carter, talk about it. One of the trickiest things to study in the brain is oxytocin. Oxytocin is it's kind of a hormonal, it's a neurotransmitter hormonal type of chemical in our brains. And it's always been understood that the mother who is nursing her child will release oxytocin, and the baby's brain will respond by releasing oxytocin. And it's any type of that kind of intense physical intimacy will create oxytocin in the brain, in this kind of really intense love. And we've known that for a long time, but we didn't know that just kindness will release oxytocin in the brain of the receiver and the giver. So when you just are being kind, when you're really going that extra mile to help somebody out, you are activating oxytocin. And the reason why you care about that is because oxytocin is it's a key critical component to health. It fights autoimmune disease. It can fight certain types of cancer. It is good for the heart. Like oxytocin is very good for you. On the flip side, threatening your health is cortisol. And cortisol is a very important hormone, and it does wonderful things. But if it's excessively released in the brain and body, it does terrible things to the brain and body. And it's a response hormone to stressful environments and stressful events. So what we want to do at work is use kindness as a way to create such a safe, loving, healthy, happy place that brains are not secreting cortisol. And in fact, with everyone being so kind to each other, they're releasing oxytocin. Again, this creates a thriving business. You get happy, healthy, high performing. You eliminate issues like burnout. And this is, as we all know, this is a dominant problem in a world right now that has way too much stress going on. And our brains think that all stress is a predator. It doesn't understand that some stress is financial and other stress is having to do public speaking. And it doesn't nuance stress like that. It just goes, oh, the brain and body are telling me there's a stressful situation and environment here. I'm going to release everything. Adrenaline, cortisol, let's go. Fight, flight, freeze. You know, that's how it acts. It acts like there's a saber-toothed tiger there, and it's not good for us. So this is one of the most exciting, you know, again, documented in neuroscience ways in which kindness is critical to our workplaces. I just want to leave this image with you. We're getting very close to the end where we'll open up for discussion, but I just want you to see this image because sometimes people think that our brains are like computers, that they're sort of technology, and they're not. They are way more like trees. They are named for all kinds of tree components, and you know what, all the time that the brain has been studied, the people that named the brain, they named it like trees because our brains look like trees. They act like trees in certain ways, and they're very, very organic. And this should remind you that important things we want to foster in the workplace are things like growth mindset. In other words, none of us are fixed. We have neuroplasticity, which means we can grow stronger, grow better, grow more kindness, grow more empathy. We can grow whatever we want because our brains will respond in kind. And we can believe that we can try harder, be better, treat each other better. It's all completely doable and possible. It's not a pipe dream of any kind. It's very realistic for the brain. And just to remind you of that phrase from neuroscientists, what fires together, wires together. The more we repeat, the more we are firing up what we want to happen. So if we want kindness to be a value in our world, we have to keep firing it up because that will wire it into our neural networks. It will make it a default. So even under stress, maybe we'll default to kindness because it's so fired up in our brains, not, you know, acting out because we're not reactive because we're stressed. And then another key phrase to remember from the neuroscientists is what the brain does a lot of, the brain gets good at. That's why if you practice your sport 3-4 times a week, you get better and better and better. Month after month, you get better and better. Same thing if you're riding your bike. Same thing if you're doing math. Same thing if you're learning a new language. So we need to take this same kind of deliberate practice, hard work, intentional, you know, repetition to kindness, because we know that kindness is arguably one of the most healthy things we can do for ourselves and for our workplaces. And this slide is about co-regulation. And co-regulation is something that we can do for each other. And it's one of our kindest things we can do. So let's pretend you're in a situation where somebody's losing their cool and they're lashing out and they're acting in completely regrettable ways and you feel like you want to save them. You can, because we all have the capacity to co-regulate. That's when we use our facial expressions and our physicality. You reach out and put your hand on someone's shoulder. You say to them, yeah, come here. You clearly need a hug. You know, you put your hand on someone's knee and say, let's deep breathe together. We're going to get through this. The team is behind you. We can survive. I know it's horrible, but if we stick together as a team, you know, we'll get it done. These types of things, you have to use like kind of a sing-song voice. You don't want to talk to them in a super calm, flat way. You want to be like really animated about it because the brain hears that as a soothing, caring thing. It's how we talk to babies and animals. We talk to our pets. We're like, oh, this is the smartest boy, like that. When you're co-regulating, you really, embarrassing as it might be, you want to use that kind of a voice. You want your kindest facial expression. You want to deeply look into the person's eyes, because when we look at each other's eyes, that's where we're activating our empathy neural networks. You know, when you are struggling to meet someone's eyes, it's because you're probably trying to be self-protective or you don't want to invade their privacy. You can just throw caution to the wind when you're co-regulating. Really look at them and say, you know, I'm here. I'm looking at you. I can see you and I see what you're going through, and we're gonna, this is a team event. We're doing this together. And you will be surprised at how the person losing it can calm down. That's co-regulation. Again, it's another one of our superpowers. Thank you to the Kindness Club. Thank you to the Chambers of Commerce that have so generously given us a platform to speak with their people today. I really appreciate it. And I'm very keen to hear people's thoughts or any questions or anything.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fraser. Really fascinating, as always. Your insights are really very much appreciated. But we were talking kind of in advance of preparing for the webinar, and I was reminded just how much the relationship a manager and an employee have, how much that affects the satisfaction of an employee. And you were saying even more so than a spouse or a life partner, right?
Yeah, the research shows that, well, and it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because you're spending oftentimes 8, 9 hours a day with your manager. You're not home, you're at the workplace. And so the workplace is a huge influence on your health and well-being, and your brain health. So again, just a reminder to all of us how critical it is and how much power we actually have to make it be what we want it to be.
We've got a question from Lori. There's a frightening trend towards nihilism in our youth right now. At the center is the denial of empathy. AI is a threat that can emphasize that isolation. What is your take on this dynamic?
Well, yeah, it's very, very serious. A large part of it, obviously, has to do with the internet and social media. This is a horrible statistic, so if anyone's feeling fragile, maybe just don't listen to this, but from 2000 to 2018, youth suicide, that's our 10-year-olds to 24-year-olds in the US, has increased by 57%. And that is a direct result of the internet. I mean, of course, there's always complexities, there's always other components, but being online is not good for brains. Neuroscientists are now using the term brain rot, for young people, which is very surprising because they don't ever use emotional sort of words like that. They never do. They always use very clinical terms, but it's so startling what they're seeing on a brain level. What's happening to kids that are in front of phones and screens all day long is they call it brain rot. Our brains are hungry for learning. They need to be, just like our bodies, daily put through their paces. It's like having a kid use ChatGPT to read a summary rather than do the work of thinking and articulating and debating and arguing and checking sources and doing all the metacognition involved in learning is terrible. Like AI and ChatGPT should be massively regulated. But as we're all seeing, we're watching our lawmakers say that books need to be regulated. They need to be banned, but there's no rules for the internet. Now, because the internet's not doing anything to kids, books are. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's really unfortunate. And we're going to all have to take to the streets, basically, if we want to see our kids doing better.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Another question from Amanda with Brain Balance. What do you think is the most effective training that employers can do for leadership and general staff as part of the onboarding and ongoing development?
I think, my idea is leading with the brain in mind for all things. I think that when we lead with the brain, then we can talk about difficult challenges without it being a blame shame. We can sidestep the whole bullying and abuse model that is being hammered into us. We have been so wired to believe that this is the only way to, there's a lot of people that believe abuse is a necessary evil for greatness. This is seen all over the place in the workplace world. And in order to sidestep it, we need to say, okay, wait a second, here's our measuring stick. The part of ourselves that is frequently dominant in the workplace, in all workplaces, even very physical ones, is our brain. It's our brain that's making the decisions, and it's connecting, it's collaborating, it's doing everything. So what does the brain science say about X, Y, and Z? Let's use that as a new way of thinking. I call it a neuro paradigm, which, Amanda, you will instantly get because it's your world. But I think that we can do that without creating massive amounts of extra work. It's just a new lens that we put on decisions we want to make about our workplaces and our leadership and our onboarding.
Excellent, thank you. And kind of on the other side of that coin, thinking about the schools and our young people, we talk about kindness in kindergarten, right? And learning to share, and throughout the earlier elementary school years. Some friends of mine and I kind of joke, like, where's the master's level PhD refresher once we're in our 30s or 40s? But the question is, how do you suggest that we continue to influence SEL or social emotional learning curriculum in schools?
I think it's really important for all adults in schools to role model. if they think that empathy and kindness are critical components to how children conduct themselves, then they need to role model it at every single turn. So the vice principal that's choosing discipline, the principal who's bringing in a family to speak to them, or speaking to a group of children, if they're not role modeling every single teacher, and it can't just be 99% of the teacher, and then there's that one teacher that's highly destructive and uses bullying methodologies, because all the kids will spend the entire day in fear, in anticipation of going to that class, which produces all kinds of stress, which interferes with learning as well as connection with one another. So I really want to see adults take a lot more of the responsibility and accountability around, if they believe in kindness and they think kids should be behaving in kind ways, then adults all the way up to our adults in the media who children watch on the news with their families, they all need to be role modeling kindness, not bullying behaviors. That's the way we're going to really see the change. You know what I love too, just a fast thing, is and I haven't done a deep dive into it, but one of the happiest countries in the world is Denmark. And Denmark teaches empathy 6-year-olds to 16-year-olds. It's a daily or weekly part of their curriculum. That's how important it's seen. I don't see that kind of, I'm not seeing that in Canada. It's more, this is a value. It's like, no, this is arguably one of the most important skills a child can learn. So why aren't we teaching it? They need it a lot more probably than geography or math or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Sometimes we hear that there are soft skills in life, right? And that perhaps kindness or empathy might be one more of those soft skills, but that doesn't mean that it's soft in the sense of not important. It is strength, and it is courage, and sharing that and serving that forward, right?
That is a classic example of gaslighting language. Gaslighting tries to tell you, I'm really tough, I'm really hard, I'm really, powerful, and you're weak and soft, and kindness is soft. It's like, no, sorry. If you want to talk brain science point of view, you're completely and utterly inaccurate.
Yeah. Well, this next question kind of gets at what you and I were talking about earlier in this week, right? And in Kindness Week and this movement that I've been participating in, some folks say, oh, your little kindness project, or, oh, kindness. And they kind of put it aside. But Nick, who works at a local wellness center, a wonderful team of people, asks, how can you show kindness to someone who is being unkind to others? And why does it matter to be kind in those situations?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. There's multiple answers to that. I'm going to say one answer. There's a particular course that's taught in here called by the Justice Institute, and it has to do with mediation. And in the Justice Institute mediation course, they teach you that when someone is lashing out, and I would call this abrasive bullying, so they're losing their cool, you want to match their passion and energy. You don't want to be angry back, but you want to be like, I hear you, not calming them down, because that can activate them more. So that would be one technique you might try. On another different angle, I work with people who they deal with hospital security. So their job is to protect doctors and nurses and medical staff from individuals who are out of control because they are under, the kind of stress you're under when you go to emergency and it's not fast enough and you're in pain and all these different things, or you're afraid for the person you're with. And he's very, very advanced. I am just paraphrasing, I'm not an expert in this, but he's taught me a lot about their approach and what they do. And they really are good at acknowledging the stress and the feelings of fear and threat and risk, and they get the person to a place where they can see that it's counterproductive to be so irate and out of control. It's counterproductive to be using harsh and humiliating language. They're not going to achieve their goal that way. They're actually making people afraid. And surprisingly, I wouldn't have anticipated this, he has great success in dealing with people who are mentally really struggling because of the pressure they're under. And he can get them to really hear him because they're being heard, they're being seen, they're not being dismissed, like, oh, calm down and take your seat. And these kinds of things are like putting fuel on the fire of someone who's just losing it. So That might be two different ways. When you're dealing with somebody who's abusive, like full-on abusive, they are often characterized by empathy erosion. When someone who has empathy erosion, what you really have to watch out for is that they're not letting you put your guard down. They're not using charisma and intelligence and language to manipulate you. They're the most dangerous people, but they come across as so caring and so sane and so helpful. That's the one you really want to be worried about. And if you are, it's very hard to detect. I mean, psychiatric experts struggle to detect this. So if you miss it, you don't feel that somehow it's a failing on your part. But we tend to think that the irate person is the really dangerous one. From a brain science point of view, it's not. It's the person that's putting on the mask of sanity. I don't know if that answers your question. That's just all my different approaches.
I think that's great. And let me see if Nick's up for it. I'm going to invite him to unmute. Let's see. To share a little bit about the kindness in the workplace that you've experienced through the wellness clinic and the kindness information you've been sharing and the changes you've observed both in your staff as well as in your clients.
I think first and foremost, it's the first thing that I notice when some of the patients that walk through our doors and they see the flyer is the instant glow in their face. They're really happy just to see someone that's trying to make a difference. And the thing that I hear most is that we need more kindness. So instantly it's a smile, but then it's a self-reflection that there isn't enough kindness. So there's a lot of thought that's going on in their head, but at the end of it, you can see that they're really passionate about bringing more kindness into this world. For myself, the way that I try to practice it in this clinic, we see people that come with a variety of different injuries, different conditions. It's very important for me to be open to the idea that sometimes not everyone is going to be kind because they're dealing with so much stuff in their personal lives. I signed up for the job of meeting people halfway and saying, hey, you are in this situation. You're experiencing a lot of this pain. I try to do my best to put a situation where they can drop their guard and experience kindness in the interaction with us at our clinic. That way they can say, this is different. I don't have to have my guard up. I don't have to be combative, on edge. I think just the whole idea of being kind to others has a ripple effect. And we're seeing a lot of success with just the way that we approach health. And we're seeing a lot of success in people's recovery.
I would just love to add to that beautiful description. That's completely backed in brain science research and nervous system research, in that as soon as people feel safe, it completely allows them, because they have homeostasis, it allows them to start their healing journey. When they don't feel safe, they can't. And so it's amazing that your kindness is about as much of a medicine and a diagnosis and a healing strategy and rehab as all of the actual medical physical you're doing. The kindness is just as important for them to get better. And I mean, obviously they're very responsive to it.
They are. I've been in that clinic a couple of times. Nick and his team do an amazing job. So thank you. We have another question on a similar thread, and I think we've probably all seen some of these bad behaviors on the news, and maybe we go to public meetings, but Bertha mentions she attended a school board meeting last night with many people in the audience, and from the start of the meeting, the elected officials starting the meeting by being very rude. What do you suggest that she do? Is it writing an email to let the board members know of their behavior? Being a member of the audience, it can be kind of tough when you're not in the queue to speak, but that you're witnessing this behavior. Any advice for opportunities to kind of tamp that down and the tenor of the meeting?
I have two answers to that. So my first answer would be, if I had been in that meeting, my hand would have shot right up. And I would have said, excuse me, I think you might have started off on the wrong foot here, but we're all here together as a group, and including you, because we care about this issue. And you don't need to be defensive or aggressive in how you talk to us. We're all here on the same page. We all care about kids. And so let's have a conversation led by you where you show and reflect to us that you also understand that. There really is no place here for a lack of kindness and respect. And then let them do what they're going to do in that moment. But in that moment, you are calling it and disarming them, and everybody's hearing you. And so it's automatically transparent, and you're taking your power back. You're not going to, you can't sit through that kind of maltreatment because someone is acting out. You just call them on it. Now, what I fear is, all of us are, I think in that meeting, you'd be okay. In the workplace, we all fear retaliation. And that's a very realistic fear. We fear that there will be the person with power and prestige and credibility is going to turn on you. And that happens. Like, I don't want to be sort of Pollyanna about this and, we just show a little bit of courage. You got to call it based on who you're with and where you're at. I'm just assuming that school board, a bunch of parents in particular, they're going to have your back if you speak up to someone like that and just say, you know what? This is not going to be the way to productively proceed. So we need to change the energy here or whatever. The workplace is a more complicated zone.
So taking kind of an international lens, our next question is building on the example of what you're sharing today in Rwanda, and in the aftermath of their genocide in 1994, they brought back Umuganda, which involves the ritual of service the last Saturday of every month. It's repetitive and it's joyous, and this has been brought to San Diego by Lori Wallace through the Great Compassion. First they serve and then they play, and she recognizes that could be a very valuable program for businesses. Is that anything that you've researched, Dr. Fraser?
I haven't researched that, but just listening to that makes me think of it. It's a brilliant idea for workplaces where you could take, once a month, even once a week, where a person finds an international example. Like, one example I know that I've read about is, and I don't remember, it's an African tribe, I don't remember the name, but what they do is if you guys might have heard of this, when a person is going to be born, they sing to the baby. They sing to the baby in the womb a particular song that's especially for the baby. Then the baby grows up as a child and they might do something wrong, or it's their birthday. When it's their birthday, they get celebrated and the village sings the song. When they do something wrong, the village gathers around them and sings them their song so they remember who they are. So it's used as a let's celebrate you, and it's used as, hey, you slipped off your journey. It happens to all of us. We're here for you, and we're gonna remind you who you really are and help you be your better self. And just think of those two rituals in the workplace. It gives people a chance to open up and tap into, many of us are different places that we come from, especially in North America. We all have history in other places in the world, many of us, except for our Indigenous people. So it would just be a beautiful thing to do. I love the idea of that.
What you're talking about reminds me too of the African proverb and the idea of Ubuntu, right? I am because we are together, and I see you and you see me. And then the greeting of the Maasai tribe, that they always greet each other, even in the warring villages, they greet each other and how are the children? Because that's what the priority is. It's how are the children doing? We have time for one more question, and then I need to hand it over to Marcy to wrap it up. But this question comes from, I believe, someone who works with our local Scouts. And we are partnering with the regional San Diego Imperial Scout Council to invite all troops and packs to perform individual and collective acts of kindness during Kindness Week. And they asked Dr. Fraser, what are ways that this can be emphasized with today's youth in other organizations to encourage kindness?
Well, I love the Scouts one, where hopefully there's a little badge you get because you have passed all of the different international events around kindness. I have presented before to the Scouts, and I love, there's so many things that Scouts do that they could teach other kids to do that are extremely good for the brain. So for example, doing things as a collective, as a group, that's really good for the brain. doing the collective activities with a constant emphasis on kindness and compassion and empathy, incredibly good for the group. Being out in nature, like getting kids in other groups out in nature, is one of the healthiest things for their brains. And this is another workplace one too. The research shows even showing images of nature, like if you can't have plants in the office, which all offices are going to be more thriving businesses if they put plants in their office space. It's incredible. You would not believe the research on it. But even looking at an image of the ocean or an image of the sea, the best, of course, is Scouts, which gets kids out in nature. These are things where kindness, because it's a brain health thing, starts rushing to the fore because you are in the kinds of environments that allow it to flourish. So yeah, I think Scouts could teach lots of different groups about how to be healthy with kids.
This brings us to the end of our time today, and I need to honor that our friends at the Carlsbad Chamber have another Zoom that starts at 2 p.m. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us and give Marcy 60 seconds to wrap up and close us out.
Yes,
Thank you so much, Dr. Fraser.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. A big thank you to the Kindness Club, Elizabeth Cox, as well as Dr. Jen Fraser, for such an inspiring and eye-opening presentation. Today's conversation is a powerful reminder that kindness is not just good for people, it's good for business. When we lead with empathy, compassion, and understanding, we create workplaces that thrive, teams that stay engaged, and communities that grow stronger together. I want to thank our partners at the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce for joining us in the shared commitment to fostering positive, people-centered leadership across our region. Let's carry this energy forward, not just for World Kindness Day, but every day. Thank you again for being part of this session.